Hello YouTube, back with another build variation, and likely my final build variation. I'm calling this my version 4. This ultimately is what I'm considering the peak quality of life, versatility, and overall just the smoothest build out of all of them that has the least amount of compromises, or at least the compromises it does make are more than acceptable, even all the way up to level cap through Steel Path Omnia Void Cascade. I'm starting off by showing Umbra this time around instead of showing Prime, but I will show the Prime variation. The important thing to know about this build is that it requires Arcane Universal Fallout. Now, you can run Arcane Energize in substitution of this, but the energy economy overall just isn't sufficient to maintain Exalted Blade out constantly. It is viable. If you don't have Arcane Universal Fallout, you can drop it in and the build will work quite nicely. The compromise that this build does is it doesn't use Blind Rage, which drops the strength. But overall, the way it impacts the overall energy economy, especially with using Radial Javelin and Furious Javelin in combination with Wrathful Advance. Overall, this is the idea behind this build is how much strength do you actually need in order to do level cap. I do demonstrate this. I do have a 2+ hour fully uploaded gameplay of me going to well past level cap in Steel Path Omnia Void Cascade. Using this, not this build, I'm using the Prime version of this build, which even has lower strength. It has 202% strength because instead of this, I'll show that build in a moment. But the idea here is simple of how much strength you actually need for level cap. Turns out you only really need 202%, so 217 is even better. The concept being you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. You get sufficient slash dash damage, Wrathful Advance, crit tier advantage, and at least 2 extra crit tiers, which puts most things, including Exalted Blade, into the 300% crit tier. Radio Javelin and Fierce Javelin, the bonus from it doesn't scale that well off of strength. It mostly scales off of enemy density or the amount of enemies within your area. So this bonus, even if you only have 3 or 4 stacks in a given scenario, it's more impactful than pretty much any other augment or potentially even blind rage. It depends on the enemies. I've demonstrated my V1 build or showed my V1 build. Instead of running Furious Javelin, that blind rage can substitute for that and then provide sufficient bonus to, like, let's say the base damage of these various abilities. But that's not ultimately the most versatile option. It's an easy and simple and streamlined option for most Steel Path content, but there is a point where that falls off, and that falls off getting close to level cap. Radio Javelin and Furious Javelin seems to bypass some level of attenuation that might attenuate based on, let's say, crit chance or crit tier. So that's the idea behind this. You're sort of distributing your damage bonuses while adding an extra layer of complexity that isn't always needed, especially in Steel Path, like base Steel Path content. You don't need to maintain Radio Javelin or Wrathful Advance up fully, and I can show that in some gameplay at the same idea applies with previous builds where Furious Javelin really likes extra strength or extra range. That extra range, I've noticed, probably doubles the overall amount of enemies that you hit when you do cast it. Going from the base 25% to or 25 meter range to 36 meter range is very impactful. I think the extra range is required for it. The extra duration, I think, is very impactful. This is the flexible. If you really wanted to run this and you didn't want to run lower strength values, then this would be how you could do it. But the overall energy economy of this just doesn't scale well in most content. Maybe if you know for certain that you're running into insane amount of enemies. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't like swapping mods just for given scenarios. It's why I don't even show any Prime or Bane mods in my in any of my gameplay, because switching a single mod depending on your content is just, it's cringe in my opinion. If you're unaware of Arcane Universal Fallout, sort of briefly describe it. So if you're running, let's say you're running Exalted Blade and you have modded on Radiation, and in this case the only thing that I'm getting electric from, and there's a mildly impactful reason for this. I'm not modding on any sort of electric damage to help weigh the radiation high enough to where it's reliably proccing. Once you get up to full ramp, the electric is 100%, or it's close enough to 100% to where you're always hitting electric at like maximum combo. And then you're getting sufficient amount of times where you're propagating radiation while spreading it with influence to paint all of your targets with at least 5, if not full stacks of radiation to help increase that drop rate. Explained this in my previous build variations. I'm running Condition Overload and Galvanized Steel. You don't have to run these if you wanted to run this mod set. The way this is polarized, you can run either mod set. But the impactful reason to run this is you can lower your base amount of damage on your initial hits to help increase radiation stacks on your targets. And then using these two combination of statuses, you're getting at least more than sacrificial pressure and getting close to prime pressure point, but then able to scale up and exceed that, like if your companion's painting it with some different status like heat and magnet and such, or if your enemy or if your teammates are. But if you preferred this and you wanted to run this, the only thing to note is that, and I explained this in another video talking about sacrificial steel versus galvanized steel, you want to have, if you're running this mod set, you want to have at least one gladiator mod. I choose this one, but if you really wanted to, you could run either, let's say you were comfortable with your combo point duration, or your base combo duration being sufficient, then you could run Galvanized Might. You could also run Gladiator Vice. There's flexibility between these two mod slots and which you prefer. I would recommend testing it, figuring out which one you like the best. If you rely more heavily on slash dash, you don't necessarily need the extra attack speed. I think having it baseline is impactful, significant to increase the overall quality of the build. At least 30%, 40%, or 55%. I would stay away from Berserker Fury, because if you notice, this is conditional on melee kill. I don't find this versatile enough, and its conditional effect it's very noticeable when you're on a boss and you don't have anything nearby to kill, and you lose that 70% attack speed. It's a overall nerf to the build, and with the idea of this being peak versatility and quality of life, this just doesn't fit into the equation. Why I run Quickening instead of, let's say, Prime Fury on this Umbra variation is because this is a daily login bonus. This is what I use on Prime, just for placing that in there. But the thing I run on Prime, where Quickening is probably overall better, is on Prime I'm running Naramon, because Prime Sure-Footed and Naramon is what I run on that variation. And I'll show that for those of us that have Excalibur Prime and prefer using that Warfare. If, let's say, you're running, and this is what I would recommend, if you're running Unaru, primaries and secondaries equipped, running both the Dexterity Arcanes, getting that extra 15 seconds is what's going to allow you to maintain combo on Exalted Blade, which part of this build, if I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but part of this build does rely on combo counter for Exalted Blade. So you're maximizing your overall performance with Exalted Blade by maintaining 12/220, so maintaining max combo. Is it required for you to function at level cap? Probably not, but as I explained in previous videos, if your combo counter isn't sufficient to kill your enemy, it's sort of a self-correcting issue. You're going to build enough combo to get to 12/220 if you're not killing things, so it's sort of a self-correcting issue. But maintaining that high combo counter can be a quality of life. So that's where, if you wanted to running primaries and secondaries, this is probably recommended if you're running Umbra. It's something that I don't do a lot of. I usually unequip primaries and secondaries, but if you're going to run them, I would highly recommend using Dexterity, especially because with this augment being functionally required on Umbra for this overall build to work properly, especially if you're in Void Cascade where you're hopping in and out of Operator like crazy, which is for the most part what most people are doing with level cap missions. because you don't want it to decast not only Exalted Blade and you lose all your combo, but you don't want it to clear out your Fierce Javelin stacks, and you don't want it to break your Wrathful Advance. So this is required for Umbra. It's the reality of it. I don't think it's that big of a deal in comparison to let's say before this was added. Before this was added, you basically would have needed to run regular Excalibur, but because this is in the game and it does for the most part function, the extra 15% strength is at least a decent bonus, but this is required for this build to function. And to solve the Prime Short-Footed problem, you're running Unaru. Unaru is underrated, I think, but it does, in this specific build, in your requirement to run at 12 by 220 as much as you can, it does force you to have some level of limitation on Umbra Dexterity Arcanes. I think the rest of this is pretty straightforward. These are pretty proven. The other thing to note, and this is something I don't know if this is talked about enough. If you're running Discipline's Merit on, let's say, your Exalted Blade, you need to run that on your equipped melee, otherwise, and vice versa. So if you're running this on your equipped melee and you aren't running it on your Exalted Blade, it actually breaks one or the. So Tennokai only works on one or the other weapon, depending on which one has Discipline's Merit. And you can sort of stat stick it if you wanted to. I don't think that's worth it. I am showing this build right now, and I played around with this build here and there. Is that this is all quest rewards, so this is all the free stuff. Getting into what some of the other weapons that are good for this build, something like Umbra Prime is a solid option. Something like Hate Incarnate. What I really like, and for those who know this reference, good for you, this is one thing I like to or that I like to run. So something like a Zaw that uses Exodia Brave, and the idea behind this is that when you don't have Exalted Blade drawn, you have this, and the goal is to get to Exalted Blade and for you to maintain Exalted Blade, because the important thing to note about energy economy with Arcane Universal Fallout is if you don't have Exalted Blade drawn, you really can't generate enough Universal Orbs with just Slash Dash alone because of the way the combo works for it right now, where it doesn't have its own combo counter. It just does piss poor damage. So you need Exalted Blade out to maintain your energy economy. So the idea behind something like this is you're able to generate enough energy to pull out Exalted Blade to then generate energy. So and this is only necessary when you don't have Exalted Blade drawn. Really, I've come to the conclusion overall that out of all the melee weapons and melee builds that I've played over the years, Exalted Blade is so powerful that it is now the primary on Excalibur. This is your primary melee weapon, even on a melee only build. Very few things come close to how powerful this is now. If you wanted another slot-in option, something like Rocket Dark Dagger, because of its ability to generate shields, the only major downside to this is that you have very little damage type versatility. So you're doubling up effectively on your electric radiation damage, and then you can maybe get gas, but you kind of need a weird Riven or a pretty interesting Riven in order to run that without sacrificing majorly on like range. So if you did want to run only electric and radiation, this will do, and it'll help keep you defensive. The other cool thing about this setup is that it does have its own energy regeneration, so when you don't have Exalted Blade out, this will proc sort of passively, as long as it's somewhat drawn, and then that 25% is to base, so it's only like 30 or so energy gain, but it's enough for you to be able to pull out Exalted Blade, get a couple of kills, and then boom, you started your sort of fission reactor of energy and dropping universal orbs, sort of like a reference to Universal Fallout. It's back on, and I've mirrored over the same Archon shards, just to demonstrate that. So I'll show Excalibur Prime. This is somewhat same build, practically the same build, except Prime Sure-Footed. And really the only thing that this affords you to do is that you can run Naramon Naramon really isn't even that great right now because its lethal levitation bonus is bugged. So this only works if you're host. I wish they would fix this because it would make this a far, far more powerful option for like Void Cascade and such. But for right now, this is I barely even proc this because most of the time you're not host, or potentially most of the time you're not the host, and it's just unreliable. So if you're running Umbra, you have to run the augment, which means you can't run Prime Sure-Footed, and as a melee-only build, you really need that knockdown immunity. Excalibur Prime affords you the ability to unequip your primaries and secondaries, and then rely on Naramon to maintaining your combo counter on Exalted Blade. And just to demonstrate, it's practically the same build. I use Gladiator Rush in this situation because I noticed the extra 6-second combo duration prevents you from decaying your combo before you get your next encounter, so it just helps you maintain combo on Exalted. Even while running Naramon, I feel like this is important. Sacrificing the 60% combo or critical damage is worth it for the because otherwise the other option would be, let's just say, running like Gladiator Vice for some more attack speed or Gladiator Might. The other option you could do, and same idea applies here, you need at least one Gladiator mod in order to get the crit tier to the right spot to get it into effectively the next crit tier while running Galvanized Steel. If you are running sacrificial mods, then you don't need that Gladiator mod. Or if you're more comfortable with lower attack speed, or you don't somehow have Primed Fury and you're a founder, then you could run Gladiator Vice in its place, and then run something even like Body Count. Something like Body Count to get even more combo duration. I think 6 seconds is enough. It's more than doubling your combo duration, so that's just what I run. Lines this again real quick. And I'll show the gameplay footage with Umbra just because it's what most people are. Or I would assume most people that are going to be looking at this build video sort of have a heavier focus on Umbra this time. And I'll repeat some of the things I've shown in my other build videos about maintaining its knockdown immunity. One last time looking through this. Alright. Getting some gameplay. Show you using my normal test mission. My companion build is the same. I don't think it matters, and I've demonstrated that it doesn't matter. You don't actually even need the synth deconstruct and duplex spawn in order to maintain energy economy, so your companion can be whatever you want it to be. I don't think it matters. It's not required to be a certain thing like it is in some of my other builds that synth deconstruct and the other sorts of energy regeneration.
They're trying to choke you out.
So when you're running Unaru, an easy thing that I'll demonstrate here is all you have to do is pop into Operator and then quick melee. And it makes it very easy for you to pop in and out. In this case, the thing you can do is when you're low on energy initially, you can modulate your bonuses, like modulating your Wrathful Advance in order to regenerate as much energy as possible. Because if you pop Wrathful Advance and you Furious Javelin stack like crazy, you're going to kill enemies fast. And the same idea is Condition Overload, where you want to modulate the initial amount of damage you're doing to be able to stack radiation, especially at low levels. A lot of the low-level missions, like sorties and such, I'll spend the entire mission not using Wrathful Advance once because it's just not necessary. The base damage, even at only 200-some% strength, is good enough. I don't mention it during modding, but if you wanted to run molt augmented, you could for that extra, in this case, like 35% power strength. I don't think it's necessary. I've been able to demonstrate it's not necessary. And removing conditional bonuses like that, I think, are overall quality of life. Since this build is focused on quality of life, versatility, sort of, never having to change anything, it's good at the start of the mission, as good as it is at the end of the mission. So molt augmented kind of doesn't fit with that. So as you can notice, the amount of energy regeneration on this build is absurd, because It doesn't take much for you to stack these enemies up with crazy amounts. And see some of my Naramon combo generation bonuses and such. Maintaining the double combo point, doing a jump and slam out of operator. The thing that this build does that isn't as good as on other builds, and it has to do with combo counter. So Slash Dash still benefits from increased combo counter like it did prior. Those sort of snapshotting and conditional bonuses on Slash Dash and Exalted Blade all apply as something that I tested recently. So that's where maintaining 12/220 to increase your Slash Dash damage is also important here. It's not just to maintain Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds and significantly higher heavy attack damage. It's also to be able to increase your Slash Dash damage. And it makes it more of a holistic approach to Excalibur with his innate advantage in comparison to other Warframes of having two Exalted abilities, having Slash Dash and Exalted. Something to demonstrate here is because we only have a progenitor bonus, or we only have the emissive bonus to apply electric. Right now I don't know if it's a bug or if it's intentional, but this emissive bonus does not apply on heavy attacks. And where that's important is if you're wanting to generate energy. If I do a heavy attack, it's only applying radiation status effects. That's sure you could work around that by modding on a little bit of electricity, or you could use it as sort of a benefit on your ability to stack radiation more reliably on targets rather than having to have it fight for status chance or status chance procs and such with electric. So there's a positive and a negative to it. It also allows you to do IPS damage to your target. So for right now, I'm not calling it a bug. I'm calling it a feature. Whether or not he agrees with that or not is up to them. But for right now, the other advantage, and just showed right there, is that if you accidentally heavy attack, you don't lose all of your combo because we're running the radiation mod that has built-in combo or heavy attack efficiency. I find that to be really powerful because I run into plenty of scenarios where I accidentally heavy attack too early or too late with a Tennokai proc or by accident, and I don't break it fast enough with a roll or with Slash Dash, and I lose combo. So I think it's an overall quality of life benefit. Helps increase the overall quality of life of this build. Now, to say that you have to run Unaru on this build it's not entirely true, because one of the advantages of Slash Dash is that if you're using Slash Dash quite a lot, then you don't have to worry about getting knocked down, since you're immune to that sort of effect while you're Slash Dashing. I don't think it's enough to rely on it, which is where I would say, unless you absolutely don't want to run a primary and secondary to increase your combo duration with Dexterity Arcanes, then you could argue that you can mimic my exact Prime build using Rest instead of Prime Sure-Footed and just entirely ignore knockdown immunity. I don't think it's worth it. I think if you're a normal player, you're probably running a primary and secondary, and Archon, or the Arcanes for Dexterity, it's easy to slot in a lot of builds. Not as big as the downside as I think people... And thank you, Kitty. I think that's a pretty good demonstration of it. My energy is pretty much constant. I would say overall, Arcane Universal Fallout and missions like these, you provide a significant amount of utility. You basically get a built-in dispensary into the build. It's the amount of energy that in health orbs that you're dropping is insane. It's enough to where you can actually maintain your energy economy with it. But to reiterate, I don't think it's worth getting the extra crit damage from replacing that one Violet Shard that I have as like the equilibrium Violet Shard. I don't think it's worth it. I think it's still worth keeping that for the scenarios where Exalted Blade's not out, or just overall increasing the energy economy.
It is done, Tenno.
I guess for demonstration, I'll also do a version of Prime in the same mission. Not really going full sweaty on this build. It does plenty of kills per minute. Not really going full send on sweating it out. So to reiterate on this setup, it's practically the same thing, but I'm running Prime Sure-Footed instead of Warrior's Rest, and I'm running Naramon. And Prime Fury, which you don't need to run. You can run Quickening, you can run whatever you really want. It's flexible, but the concept applies of what you're using.
Your enemies have grown fierce. Use all that you have learned.
They have just shut down all systems. I'm sending life support capsules.
One of the things I've
away.
done recently too is focusing away from exclusive heavy attack builds, and in this case, this build is a little bit more flexible. It's designed to be able to use Tennokai procs in order to increase its damage, and not just be heavy attack spamming. I think we have enough energy. And just as demonstrated, there's 500 plus energy, which is an absurd amount. And I don't even have, even to reiterate here, I don't even have my full combo, and I don't even have Wrathful Advance and Furious Javelin sets. At this tier, it's mostly redundant, it's unnecessary. It's when you get higher up, or depending on the enemy types, it might be necessary. You can modulate it though until you get max energy. But to reiterate the point, it's not even necessary until you're, let's say, you're full energy like I am, which probably tons of orbs. Get only a few stacks, yeah, 181% increased damage from Furious Javelin. Slash dash your way to victory. I can go over some of the previous points that I've made in demonstrating this build video. Some really important things to understand is your ability to micro slide in between your stances, or between combos of your Exalted blades, so that you don't proc the slide blind. The slide blind like that, which on Prime doesn't make a sound effect if you subsume off radio blind. Works on Umbra. That's a bug that I've reported. I don't think it's a priority though. So being able to increase it so that you don't do that. So modulating your slide to me. And then the other concept is in glide attacking. So because of, like, sure, you could just really simply run this build, just press W, hold that mouse button, or hold your trigger time. But you do move a little bit better and a little bit faster if you're aim gliding. So aim gliding and meleeing like this right here is just overall, I think, faster. It's a little bit more advanced.
Life support on the way.
Depending on which Incarnate weapon you're running, if you're maintaining your Incarnate bonus, that's even faster if you have increased particle velocity. Or if you're doing something cookie cutter like running Kratos, just because of how generally worthless your melee weapon is in comparison to Exalted Blade right now. I mentioned it briefly before. Usually the melee weapon I equip, I like to have maybe Toxin, maybe Magnetic on it. That helps increase your damage type variety, so that when you're facing various enemies, you're not relying. If, let's say, they're relatively immune to electric and radiation, you have something else that you can pull out. That's also one of the reasons why I kind of prefer the way the heavy attack works, where it ignores that emissive and gives you IPS. It generally just ignores chromatically. That's just what I prefer. So to go over this again, I'll go over this again real quickly. So one of the things I highly recommend with Wrathful Advance that I do is in your keybinds, if you're on mouse and keyboard, keybinding, using your scroll wheel down in this case, or scroll wheel buttons in general, is just very easy to hit. By Wrathful Advance, I scroll wheel down and it works. And then the other thing that you want to do is you want to invert shields. So you want to run this inverted. So those are things that I'd highly recommend. It makes it probably why it looks so easy for me to proc this, because I'm just scrolling down while looking at the ground like this. It's very easy to maintain. Use it as a mobility ability as well. I recast it probably more often than I should, just out of habit, but with how good the energy economy on this build, it doesn't matter. Wrathful Advance makes it a little bit more problematic if you're also maintaining Furious Shout and stacks. You can run into energy economy issues if you're spamming slash dash, like you're doing this. If the mob density isn't great enough and you're maintaining all your abilities, maybe we'll find out. But you could do this and get pretty crazy immunity frames because you're immune every time you cast this and you generate shields. But as you notice now, I'm only at 200 some. Energy economy not that great when you're doing that. I don't think it's necessary. The extra CC applied from radiation does help make this build tanky on top of the advantage of being able to run triple Umbra and getting enough base health and armor to not die to rain, or even up to Steel Path, Toxin Clouds and such. I show this in my previous builds, but on operator side of things, I recommend having some sort of healing just as a backup, whether that's Magus Repair or some of the other arcanes.
A valuable lesson.
Because Unaru and Naramon don't have any of that built into it, that's where that arcane comes in. If you run something like Vazarin, which is viable in this as well as running Unaru, even on Umbra, you don't need that you don't need that healing. So using something like Magus Cloud. And I can show that real quick too. This operator build translates to pretty much all these variations. This is just a 147 amp. Kind of pick your choice of amp, but running some sort of healing, I think it's highly recommended as a backup. So yeah, that's the conclusion of this build. It's unlikely I'll find a V5. I already tested a different variation, trying to use something like Crescendo in order to maximize slash dash damage without running Influence. Influence should scale so much better than everything else right now that it's kind of de facto with how Chromatic Blade works, and it's hard to beat. It really is hard to beat, especially when you're able to run something like Universal Fallout and maintaining just an absurd energy economy. The energy economy of this isn't even its only benefit. The ability for you to get nearly infinite healing as well just smooths out the build so much. So if there's any questions about this, any suggestions as well that anyone might have thought of that I haven't thought of, feel free to comment below and stand by for the next video.